Last weekend we saw that MotoGP celebrated its 75th anniversary since the World Championship began in 1949, and to celebrate this landmark, what the series allowed all of the teams to do was run a throwback livery. And this got me thinking. I was thinking, what if all of the Formula 1 teams who have run throwback liveries in the past, but not all at the same time, what if they did this all at one Grand Prix? All of them ran a retro livery that they ran in the past through their previous guises and throughout the team's history. Because after all, next year we'll celebrate the 75th anniversary of Formula 1 since it began in 1950. So it would make the perfect sense for all of the teams to run a retro livery at next year's British Grand Prix at Silverstone. So what I thought I'd do for this video is to go through all of the 10 teams and pick which livery I would like them to run at a Grand Prix next year to celebrate Formula 1's 75th anniversary. Also, feel free to leave some of your suggestions and some of your picks as to which of the liveries you would like to see all of the 10 teams run as a one-off next year in the comment section. What I thought I'd do is I'll go through all of the teams in the current Constructors' Championship order. So we're going to start with the reigning champions, Red Bull. Now for Red Bull, there are a few options that I was sort of mulling over. I think that the 2010 livery is something that they should consider because, of course, it's the year that they won the Formula 1 Drivers and Constructors' Championships for the first time. So that would be a nice way to commemorate that achievement. Also, I think they should also possibly consider running the 2004 testing livery, obviously before they actually became a fully fledged outfit when they'd just taken over the Jaguar team, and they ran a livery that was very similar to the cans that we see on the shelves in supermarkets and so on. It was just very basic, but it really worked, and I think that would be a nice way to celebrate the team's history in Formula 1. But the one that I would actually pick, I would pick the one that they ran in their first season in 2005, and that for me would be the livery I would choose, because next year would obviously celebrate the 20th anniversary of Red Bull entering Formula 1. I think that would be kind of like the perfect way for them to celebrate that landmark. So for me, Red Bull, I would like to see them run the 2005 livery. Moving on to McLaren. Now, again, there are a few options that I would have possibly chosen. I think certainly the West livery from the 2000s, very iconic. I think that was an option that McLaren could run for next year as a one-off. I also think that the Chrome livery, the Chrome Vodafone livery that they ran, particularly in 2007, 2008, very iconic, brilliant. I love that livery. But the one I think that McLaren have to choose, we know that they've sort of teased us over the past few years with sort of one-off liveries of them possibly going back to this livery, but they never have. This would be a perfect opportunity for them to do so, and that is, of course, the iconic Marlboro livery that they ran for over 2 decades. They ran it from 1974 to 1996. The red and white Marlboro livery is one of the greatest, possibly the greatest livery that's ever been seen in Formula 1. Of course, when you think of the red and white McLaren, you immediately think of Senna and Prost battling and dueling as when they were teammates, all the controversy and so on. It's just a brilliant and simplistic, very simplistic livery, and it just works. So that's the one I would choose for McLaren to run. Now, what would I choose for Ferrari? There are, again, a number of options that I was sort of mulling over. Certainly the Marlboro Ferrari I was definitely considering, but I think that now that I've chosen the McLaren to run the Marlboro livery, I don't think it would make sense. But that for me would have been the one I've picked had I not decided that McLaren should run the Marlboro livery, because the red Marlboro livery that Ferrari ran, particularly during the 2000s, it's the one that I remember the most. It's part of my childhood. My favourite car is the F2004. My favourite driver is Michael Schumacher, so it obviously brings back all those memories. So in that case, in not choosing that one, I've thought about maybe the livery that Ferrari ran in the 70s in the sort of Niki Lauda era, with the white base on the top of the airbox and the Italian flag pinstripes. I thought that was one of Ferrari's best ever liveries. But the one I'd actually pick is the one that they used in 1990, 1991 with the black front and rear wings. And the 1990 car in particular was one of the most beautiful cars ever designed in Formula 1. So that's the one I think I would choose. I'd like Ferrari to run the 1990 livery as a one-off. Now moving on to Mercedes, and there isn't a lot to choose from in terms of the liveries, because of course they've only either ran a silver or black colour scheme during their time in Formula 1. So I think, given that they've got a sort of mixture between the two this year, I think it would be a nice thing for Mercedes to go back to their roots, back to the 1950s, when of course they first entered Formula 1 and they ran for 2 seasons in 1954 and 1955. I think that's the livery that they should go back to, because it was obviously a successful time for them on the track. Obviously a fantastic driver lineup in Juan Manuel Fangio and Sterling Moss obviously brought them another 2 World Championships, and I think that will be a nice throwback because, of course, I think on the if I'm correct, on the cars they ran the numbers on the side and sort of it was in a white circle with a bit of with a red pinstripe, I think, on the outside, and that was really iconic. So that's something that they could consider running on the side pods as a sort of throwback to that period. So that's the one I'd choose from Mercedes, 1954-1955 livery. Next up, Aston Martin. Now, for Aston Martin, they have run a very similar livery since they entered Formula 1 in 2021, when they obviously took over the Racing Point team. So I would say that this is a clear opportunity for the Aston Martin to actually instead look at possibly running a livery that they ran during one of their previous guises. So you've got quite a lot of options. You've either got obviously Jordan, where the team's roots initially began, you've got Midland, you've got Spiker, you've got Force India, and then Racing Point. But for me, I think actually this is the perfect time or perfect opportunity for them to use a green livery that Jordan ran in their first year in 1991. One of the most iconic cars, the Jordan 191. Of course, the car that is most famous for giving Michael Schumacher his Grand Prix debut at Spa in that very year. And it was a beautiful livery, the green 7-Up livery. Everything about it is just perfect. You know, I can't really put it into words. It's just one of those ones where you just look at it and you instantly know that it's a classic. It's beautiful. So I think, given that Aston Martin running green and that the Jordan running green during their first year in 91, it would be the perfect segue for them to use this livery. So the Jordan 191 livery is the one that I would like Aston Martin to run next year. RB or VCARB as they're known, which livery would I choose for them? There's quite a lot of options because, of course, they've also been through a couple of different guises throughout the team's history. Obviously, they started off as Minardi back in the mid-80s, all the way through to 2005 when Red Bull bought them and changed the team name to Toro Rosso. And then, of course, they became AlphaTauri for another rebrand at the start of 2020, and of course now they are RB/VCARB. So which livery would I choose? Well, I'm tempted to go with a Minardi livery as a proper throwback, but actually I think it's only appropriate that we pick one from the Toro Rosso era. So which one should we go for? Although 2017 to 2019 Toro Rosso I think is one of the greatest liveries ever, that is absolutely perfect. I think actually it would be quite appropriate to go with the first ever Toro Rosso livery from 2006 with the Red Bull on the side of the car, and of course that was the last ever car to run a V10 engine, albeit rev limited. So I think, and that for a livery, I think it was actually a very nice livery. It wasn't, as I say, as good as the 2017 to 2019 livery. I think that was absolutely beautiful with the blue and the red. But for me, that's the one I'd pick. I'd go with the 2006 Toro Rosso livery for RB to run as a one-off next year. Next up is Haas. Now, Haas have actually run quite a few different liveries since they've been in Formula 1 from 2016. Obviously, they started off with a grey livery, then they moved to a silver livery for 2018. Then the year after, in 2019, they obviously struck a deal with Rich Energy, and that went really well, didn't it? Where they ran the black and gold livery. Then they obviously, when that deal came to an end, they went back to the silver livery for 2020, and then when Nikita Mazepin and his father obviously came on board for 2021 with all their billions of money, they obviously went to a white livery, and that's what they've stayed with, albeit slightly tweaked from that first year in 21. So which one would I go for? I think for me it's only appropriate that they go back to the 2018 livery, which was a fantastic livery. It was the silver with a mixture of the red, the white and the black. And I think, given that year 2018 was Haas's best ever in Formula 1, they finished P5 in the Constructors, probably on average had the fourth fastest car that year. They weren't quite consistent enough compared to Renault, who finished just ahead of them in the championship that year. I think it was probably a missed opportunity for them, but given how successful they were as obviously an independent, it was a great achievement for them to finish P5. So that's a livery I'll go with for Haas to run as a one-off, the 2018 livery. Just 3 more teams remaining then, and now we're going to move on to Alpine. Now, Alpine obviously have quite a history because, of course, like some of the teams that I mentioned previously, they also have been through a number of different guises through the past, but it has always remained Team Enstone. It obviously started off as Tolman in the 1980s, then obviously became Benetton, then it became Renault, then it went to Lotus, then it went back to Renault, and now is Alpine. So which livery should we go for? There's quite a number of options. I think a Tolman livery would be great. I think particularly the 1984, which of course is iconic because of course that's the first car that Ayrton Senna drove in his Formula One career. I think also a mid-90s Benetton, through that period where the team obviously won 2 world championships with Michael Schumacher in the mid-90s. That would be a fantastic throwback. But the one for me I think that stands out, it's got to be in the mid-2000s, the mild 7 blue and yellow Renault that Fernando Alonso drove in 2005 and 2006 to World Championship glory. I think that was just such a brilliant and iconic livery because it just stood out so well with the blue and yellow. It just worked. It was so vibrant. It was beautiful. It was fantastic. It's one of the cars that you instantly recognise still to this day. So that's the one I choose for Alpine to run as a one-off, the 2005-2006 mild 7 Renault livery. Williams. Now this is going to be a bit of a tricky one because Williams really have run some beautiful liveries over the past. I think you can even go back to one of their first liveries during the 80s when they ran the white liveries. That was a beautiful car. And then I would also certainly look at the 1992 livery, the Cannon livery, that was obviously incorporated onto one of the greatest cars of all time, the FW14B that Nigel Mansell powered to World Championship glory in 1992. You also can look at the BMW years, the HP/Compact livery that I think was a great livery as well, and more recently the Martini livery that they ran from 2014 to 2018 that was really simple, didn't change much from over those 5 seasons, but it was just really simple and really effective. But the one that I choose, I think, because it represents one of the most dominant periods in Formula One, and certainly probably Williams' best period, is the blue Rothmans livery that they ran from 1994 to 1997. Obviously represents a time that was initially quite tragic, obviously, because obviously Senna, who joined Williams at the start of 94, obviously was killed in a Williams just 3 races into his Williams career at Imola, and obviously he was driving the Rothmans livery at the time of his death. Although it's got a bit of a tragic history behind it, it went on to be very successful. Of course, won the Constructors' Championship in that year, 94, then won the Drivers' and Constructors' Championships in 1996 and 1997 with Damon Hill and Jacques Villeneuve. So that for me is the one that I would like Williams to run as a one-off, the blue Rothmans livery from the mid-90s. Last but not least, Sauber. Which Sauber livery should they run next year? Well, there are a couple of options. I think certainly the first ever Sauber from 1993, the black livery, which really was menacing. It really looked really dangerous. It looked fantastic. That's one that I think I would consider. But I think the one that stands out for me is one of the blue Petronas liveries that Sauber ran from 1997 to 2005. All were beautiful, all were fantastic. So which one would I choose in particular? Well, I think it's got to be one that really stands out, not just in terms of the livery, but also the car and how it would have achieved on track. So I'm going to go with the 2001 livery because that's where Sauber finished P4 in the Constructors' Championship, the highest they've ever finished as an independent. Now, before, obviously, some of you point out that when they were BMW Sauber, when they were taken over by BMW in 2006, they went on to finish second in 2007 and then third in 2008. But obviously this was when they were an independent, and this at the time was a fantastic achievement because, of course, compared to the big teams, they didn't have a lot of money and didn't have a lot of resources, but they finished behind the big 3, Ferrari, McLaren and Williams. So it was a fantastic achievement at the time. And second reason is, of course, the driver lineup that year. They had a young lineup of Nick Heidfeld, who of course went on to achieve 13 podiums and probably earn a reputation as the best driver never to win a race. And then, of course, they ran a rookie, a young Finn named Kimi Räikkönen, who, of course, went on to become world champion in 2007. So that's the one that I would choose for Sauber to run, the 2001 blue Petronas livery. So there you have it. Those are my picks for the liveries that I would like to see the teams run as a one-off should Formula 1 decide to allow all of the teams to run a retro livery for the 75th anniversary of the World Championship next year. But that's it for this video, guys. Don't forget to like the video and to subscribe to the channel also. Thanks for watching, guys, and I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.